She saw him across the room. Not just looked, saw. The way eyes meet when the world slows down for a second. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. That's what made him stand out. While others talked loudly, laughed too hard, and flashed their wealth, he stood quietly near the bookshelf at her cousin's engagement party, sipping coffee and reading the title of a novel like it meant more than the party around him. That calmness pulled her in. She asked someone, "Who's that?" "Oh, him? That's Rayyan. Works in finance. Just came back from Dubai. Doing really well, I've heard." The answer pleased her more than she admitted. It wasn't just his looks, though he was effortlessly attractive, it was his presence. Solid. Gentle. Self-assured. Like he didn't need the world's approval to feel complete. Later that evening, they ended up talking. It started with small talk, about the decorations, the weather, someone's overly dramatic dance performance. But something clicked. He listened when she spoke. Really listened. And when he spoke, it wasn't to impress her. It was to include her in his world. He told her about his love for books, his quiet nature, and how he didn't like big gatherings but came because his mother insisted. By the time dessert was served, she was already building stories in her head. Stories where he came home from work with tired eyes and she made him tea. Where they'd read together in bed. Where life was peaceful, stable, and safe. He didn't just meet her expectations. He fit into them like he had always been there. That night, she went home and lay in bed, replaying every moment. His voice. His laugh. The way he said her name, even if only once. And the way his eyes never wandered, not even when other girls tried to grab his attention. For weeks, she waited for the next meeting. And when it came, a cousin's dinner, she wore the blue dress her sister always said made her look serious but sweet. And this time, he approached her first. "Are you always this calm in chaos?" he had asked. She smiled. "Only when I meet someone quieter than me." The rest unfolded like a soft melody. Calls turned into messages. Messages into late-night conversations. Their connection deepened with every passing week. He told her about his dreams, how he wanted to start his own business, how he saved every penny with purpose, how he didn't care for flashy things. She admired his focus, his discipline, his plans. He, in turn, admired her softness, her understanding nature, the way she didn't demand attention but naturally got it. She was different from the girls he'd met. She didn't chase glitter. She wanted something real. Or so she believed. When he proposed, her answer wasn't a surprise. It felt inevitable, like the final step of a journey that had already begun the moment she saw him standing by that bookshelf. Their engagement was celebrated with joy. Everyone said they looked perfect together. He bought her a simple but elegant ring, exactly her style, not too showy, but deeply thoughtful. She didn't care about the size of the diamond. She cared about the hands that gave it, at least in the beginning. They got married a few months later. The ceremony was intimate, the vows sincere, and that night, lying beside him for the first time, she whispered, "You're everything I dreamed of." He kissed her forehead and replied, "Let's turn those dreams into a life." And for a while, that's exactly what they did. The wedding was simple, elegant, and full of warmth, exactly how she had imagined it. There were no dramatic entries or overly loud music, just soft lights, genuine smiles, and heartfelt blessings. Rayyan looked at her like she was the only person in the room, and in that moment, she felt like the most special woman on earth. Their new life began in a cozy apartment he had prepared well in advance. It wasn't luxurious, but it was tasteful and filled with thoughtful touches, scented candles, neatly arranged books, a tiny balcony with 2 chairs, and a view of the city lights. He carried her across the threshold, laughing awkwardly as he bumped into the doorframe. "I'll work on my muscles," he teased. She smiled, rested her head on his shoulder, and whispered, "Just don't drop me, ever." He didn't. Not in those early days. Married life was everything she had dreamed of and more. Mornings began with fresh coffee, shared breakfasts, and playful arguments about who used more water in the shower. He would leave for work in perfectly ironed shirts, and she'd watch him from the balcony until he disappeared down the street. Evenings were filled with little adventures. Sometimes it was dinner at a rooftop restaurant. Sometimes it was a drive to nowhere, their hands intertwined as soft music played. Other times, it was just the two of them curled up on the couch, sharing snacks and watching movies until they both fell asleep mid-scene. Rayanne never came home empty-handed. One day it was her favorite chocolate. Another day, a flower he picked from a roadside garden. Sometimes, just a funny story from work that made her laugh until her stomach hurt. He had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary. Vacations came too, not expensive, but beautifully planned. A weekend in Murray, a beachside stay in Karachi, a surprise trip to Skardu. He'd book everything himself, carry her bags, make silly videos, and insist on taking one too many couple selfies. She posted the best ones on Instagram, captioning them, "Married my best friend Red Heart, #blessed, #forever us." People commented, "You guys are goals." And secretly she believed it too. But it wasn't just about the gifts and getaways. It was the way he remembered how she liked her tea, with a little cinnamon and barely any sugar. The way he sat quietly beside her when she was upset, not asking questions, just offering presence. The way he talked about her to others, with pride, not possession. He made her feel seen, heard, loved. She told her mother one day, "I think I married a man from a novel. You know, the kind who only exists in fiction." Her mother smiled and replied, "Then hold on to him. Men like that are rare." And she did. At least for a while. They were the couple everyone admired. No fights, no drama, no distance. Or so it appeared. Everything was picture perfect. Smiles in public, affection in private, and enough laughter to fill every room they entered. But slowly, so slowly that neither of them noticed at first, life started to shift. The fairy tale, as beautiful as it was, began to show tiny cracks at the edges. Not big enough to panic over. Just little changes. But that's later. For now, in these first few months, they were happy. Not just in love, in sync. As if they were two parts of the same melody, dancing to the same rhythm, dreaming the same dreams. And in those moments, she was certain. She had found her forever. Every morning, Rayanne left the apartment by 8 o'clock sharp, dressed in crisp shirts and polished shoes, briefcase in hand, and focus in his eyes. He was the kind of man who never needed reminders. His calendar was always full, his mind always alert. He worked with purpose, and she admired that deeply. He wasn't just clocking hours, he was building something. Something real. Something for their future. She often watched him from the window, disappearing into the crowd, thinking, "That's my husband. He doesn't just work, he creates." Whenever friends or relatives came over and someone casually asked, "So, what exactly does Rayanne do?" she would sit a little straighter, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "He's in financial strategy and investment," she'd say, even though she didn't fully understand what that meant. But the way she said it carried pride, like someone introducing the architect of a masterpiece. His job was demanding, but he made time for her. He often came home exhausted, sleeves rolled up, forehead sweaty, shoulders heavy, but still with a warm kiss on her cheek and a "tell me about your day" ready on his lips. And she would. Not because her day was particularly interesting, but because he made it feel worth sharing. He celebrated her little wins too. When she finished decorating the guest room, he said it looked like something out of a magazine. When she cooked something new, he took pictures and posted them with captions like, "Lucky me, chef at home." He never made her feel like she was doing less. In fact, he made her feel like they were building this life together, brick by brick, effort by effort. People began to notice. At weddings, when Rayanne greeted elders with respect, offered his seat to strangers, or carried gifts himself, people would whisper, "What a grounded man." And she'd nod quietly, thinking, "Yes, that's mine." Her cousins would ask, "Does he really help in the kitchen too?" She'd grin, sometimes. "But only if I beg." But deep down, she knew he did more than most. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. She became the woman others looked up to. The lucky one. The one who didn't just marry for love, but married well, married wisely. When her old college friend visited and saw their apartment, the framed wedding photos, the fresh flowers always in the vase, she said, "You really won the lottery, didn't you?" And she had. At least that's what it felt like. She often scrolled through social media, reading posts from women who complained about careless husbands, forgotten anniversaries, disrespect, or silence. She never related. Her posts were different, full of smiles, matching outfits, anniversary trips, and captions like, "Behind every successful woman is a man who claps the loudest." He gave her everything she had dreamed of: a home, a name, a partner who didn't just provide but protected and respected. And every time someone praised him, she would smile with a glow in her eyes and say, "He built everything with his own hands. He deserves it all." Those words were her anthem. They weren't rehearsed. They were real. She believed in him. She admired him. His success felt like her own. She started noticing the little symbols of his hard work: the better furniture, the upgraded phone, the little extras spent on a fancy cake for their anniversary. They weren't rich, but they were rising. Slowly, steadily. And in her heart, she felt safe. Not because the bank balance was full, but because the man by her side was full of drive. But what she didn't realize was that admiration can turn fragile when it's rooted only in what someone brings to the table, not who they are when the table is empty. For now, though, she couldn't imagine anything changing. Not the late-night talks. Not the weekend plans. Not the security. She was proud of him. Deeply, loudly, beautifully proud. But the day was coming when that pride would be tested. Not by another woman. Not by a mistake. But by something as silent as it is cruel: loss. It started quietly, the way most storms do. Reby came home a little later than usual one evening. His shirt was wrinkled, his phone kept buzzing, and his usual warm smile had faded into a distracted frown. She noticed, of course. But she didn't ask much. Everyone had tough days at work, right? "Everything okay?" she asked gently, placing his dinner in front of him. He looked up and forced a small smile. "Yeah, just a few delays in the project. Nothing serious." She believed him. But over the next few weeks, the changes became impossible to ignore. He stopped talking about work. His phone, once filled with calls and meetings, lay silent for hours. He started waking up later, often skipping breakfast, and sitting for long periods staring at his laptop. One morning, she asked again, a little more firmly this time, "Ryan, what's going on?" He sighed, long and heavy, and finally said it. "I lost a major deal. Actually, two. And they were supposed to carry us through this quarter." She blinked. "But your job?" He hesitated. Then came the words that sliced through the calm they had built. "I've been laid off." For a moment, the world felt still, like someone had turned down the volume of life. He looked down at his hands, ashamed, like he had just failed an exam he hadn't studied for. And she? She didn't know what to feel. A shock? Fear? Confusion? "Since when?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks, he admitted. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought I'd figure something out by now." She didn't respond. She simply stood, walked to the sink, and began rinsing a dish that was already clean. The following days were quiet. Reby stayed home, glued to screen, sending CVs, taking calls, and chasing leads. But nothing seemed to work. Everyone was downsizing. Budgets were frozen. Interviews led nowhere. The apartment began to feel smaller, heavier. The lightness they once carried, inside jokes, spontaneous plans, late-night talks, began to fade under the weight of unspoken tension. He stopped bringing her flowers. She stopped asking how his day was. Instead of laughter, silence settled between them. And within that silence lived something more dangerous: disappointment. One evening, she stood in the kitchen going through the bills. Rent. Utilities. Credit card. The numbers didn't lie. Savings were thinning out fast. "We need to cut back," she said bluntly, not looking up. He nodded without argument. But something in his eyes dimmed further. They stopped ordering food. Stopped going out. She canceled her salon appointment. He stopped refueling the car unless it was necessary. The life they had built, brick by brick, now felt like a house made of cards, collapsing with each gust of reality. And still, Rayyan tried. He applied everywhere. Called former colleagues. Reached out to clients. Took freelance projects, some small, some barely paying. But the truth was undeniable. His confidence was slowly cracking. He no longer walked tall. His shoulders slumped. He smiled less. Talked less. Slept more. He didn't just lose a job, he lost a part of himself. She watched him change, and at first, she felt sympathy. She made his favorite meals, encouraged him, told him, "This is just a phase, Rayyan. You'll bounce back." But over time, her encouragement turned thin. Patience has limits, especially when it's mixed with fear. One night, she looked at him, sitting in the dark with his laptop screen glowing on his tired face, and thought, "This isn't the man I married." She didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But the thought had taken root. The fall wasn't dramatic. There were no fights, no slammed doors, no harsh words. It was slower than that. Quieter. Like a slow leak in a tire, unnoticed until the car stops moving. And Rayyan, who once carried the world with ease, now struggled just to carry himself. The man who once bought her chocolates and held her hand through crowded streets now sat silently at the dining table, avoiding her eyes. And she, who once called him her dream man, now found herself wishing things could just go back to normal. But normal had left the room the day he lost his job, and neither of them knew how to bring it back. It began with little things that didn't seem like complaints at first. One evening, as Rayyan set the table with the same simplicity they'd come to accept, she casually muttered, "We haven't eaten out in weeks. Even a small dinner would be nice, you know." He looked up from the plates and offered a quiet smile. "Maybe next week, when I close this freelance project." She didn't reply. The silence lingered longer than the scent of the food on the stove. At first, she tried to be understanding. She had grown up in comfort. Her father had always provided more than enough, and she never had to think about budgets or limits. But now, with Rayyan home all day, the bills piling up, and the life she had posted proudly on Instagram slowly fading into a quiet blur, frustration began replacing empathy. The spark in her eyes dulled. Not from tiredness, from resentment. The comments grew sharper. "This Corda again? Don't you think you should look more professional? What if someone calls you for a video interview? You promised to fix the leaking tap last week. I guess even that needs a budget now. Other husbands are busy providing. Mine is just busy being home." Each word cut deeper than the last. Rayyan didn't argue. He just nodded, apologized, or stayed silent. But every jab, every disappointed glance chipped away at his spirit. He wasn't just losing money, he was losing her approval. And, maybe worse, her admiration. One evening, he offered to cook dinner, hoping it might lift her mood. He made her favorite, white sauce pasta with garlic bread. He even set the table with candles, something he hadn't done in months. She came home from her cousin's baby shower, heels clicking against the floor, makeup still flawless. She looked at the table, then at him. "Pasta again?" she said, her voice dry. "We're eating like college students now." Rayyan's hand, holding the serving spoon, froze midair. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Her tone began to shift permanently. Where once there had been warmth, there was now sarcasm. Where once she laughed at his jokes, she now rolled her eyes. And where once she called him her world, now she barely called him anything at all. She had started measuring his worth by what he brought home, not by what he held in his heart. Her love, once unconditional, had become transactional. Unspoken but loud. They still shared the same bed, but now with their backs turned. They still shared meals, but barely spoke while eating. The intimacy faded slowly, not just physically, but emotionally. Every gesture was weighed. Every effort ignored. He would tell her, "I'm trying, I promise. Just give me a little more time." And she would reply, "Time doesn't pay rent, Rayyan." He flinched when she said that. But he didn't argue. Because somewhere inside he wondered if she was right. Then came the comparison phase. My cousin's husband just got promoted. They're going to Turkey next month. She just bought a new dress. I haven't bought anything in 3 months. Other men treat their wives like queens. I feel like a beggar asking for a basic dinner. Rayyan listened. Sometimes he apologized. Sometimes he walked out of the room. But every word etched itself into his chest like a quiet scar. He had married a woman who once told him, "You're everything I dreamed of." Now, she looked at him like a burden. Her disappointment wasn't just in her words, it was in her eyes, her silence, her absence. She started staying out longer, visiting friends, going to family events alone, spending hours scrolling on her phone, laughing at others' reels, rarely glancing at the man sitting beside her, the man she once called her partner. The shift was complete. She hadn't left physically, but emotionally, she had already moved out. And Rayyan? He still tried. He still woke up early, ironed his shirts, sent out resumes, taught himself new skills, applied for remote roles. But now, he did it more out of fear than ambition. Fear of losing her completely. Fear of being seen as less than. Fear of not being enough. One night, as they lay in silence, he whispered, "Do you still believe in me?" She didn't answer right away. Then finally she said, "I believe in results, Rayyan, not promises." He closed his eyes. That sentence didn't just hurt. It ended something. She used to love going out. Family dinners, cousins' birthdays, coffee with old classmates. She never missed an event. And wherever she went proudly, with Rayyan by her side, hand in hand, like the power couple they once were. But now? Now, her excuses came faster than invitations. Not feeling well. Too much to do at home. Maybe next time. At first, people believed her. But eventually, they began to ask, "Is everything okay?" She'd force a smile and nod. Just taking a break from all the noise. But the truth was simpler and sadder. She didn't want to face the world with him anymore. It wasn't just about the money. It was about perception. Her world, both offline and online, was built around the image of being married to a strong, successful, well-dressed, always earning man. The photos, the captions, the stories, they all told the tale of a perfect life. And now, with Rayyan jobless, dressed in old clothes, growing quieter and duller by the day, she feared what people might think, what they might say. She began to look at him differently. Not just in private, but in public, too. One afternoon, they were invited to her cousin's engagement party. Rayyan wore his best shirt, the one he hadn't worn in months. He even borrowed a blazer from a friend just to look presentable. As they got ready to leave, she looked at him and said flatly, "Can you please not talk about being between jobs? Just don't bring it up." He looked confused. "I wasn't planning to. Why would I?" She sighed. "Because people ask questions, Rayyan. And I'm tired of pretending everything's okay." He didn't argue. He just looked away. At the event, she walked 2 steps ahead of him, smiling for pictures, laughing a little too loudly, making conversation, all while carefully keeping him in the background. She avoided couple photos. When asked where Rayyan was, she said, "Oh, he's somewhere around." She stopped introducing him with pride, stopped touching his arm, stopped looking at him like he mattered. And he noticed. Every bit of it. On the ride home, he finally said it. "I don't think you're ashamed of me, Zara. I know you are." She didn't deny it. She just stared out the window and whispered, "What do you expect me to do?" He turned his face toward her, hurt in every syllable. "Stand beside me." That's all I ever expected. She didn't respond, because somewhere deep inside, she didn't want to. The fear of judgment became a shadow in their home. She stopped inviting people over. When friends called, she kept conversations short. When relatives asked why they hadn't traveled in months, she laughed and said, "Oh, we're just saving for something big." Every lie was a shield. Every excuse a way to hide the truth. Her husband wasn't earning. She began to compare more, envy more, scroll more. She saw wives in luxury vacations with their husbands, dinner dates, surprise gifts, new cars. And she'd glance over at Rayanne, sitting cross-legged on the floor, trying to fix a broken plug or write another job application, and feel disappointed. Not just with him, with her life. Sometimes at night, she would cry quietly into her pillow. But not for him, not for what he was going through. She cried for herself, for the life she imagined but didn't get, for the attention she used to enjoy, for the compliments that had stopped, for the world that no longer envied her. And then she would wipe her tears and sleep, facing the wall. Rayanne would lay awake behind her, eyes wide open in the dark. He had lost his income, but now he was starting to lose her loyalty too. One day, he finally asked, "Do you ever think of leaving me?" She froze, then turned to him and asked coldly, "What would you do if I said yes?" He didn't flinch. "I'd still want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." There was no anger in his voice, no accusation, just sadness, the kind that doesn't scream, only sinks. She looked at him for a long moment, then walked away without replying, because she didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he said it, or the fact that a part of her had already thought about it. He still woke up early, even with nowhere to go, no office to report to, no meetings lined up. Rayanne continued to rise with the sun. It was his way of telling himself he hadn't given up.
Not yet.
He shaved every other day, kept his shirts neatly folded, organized his files, though they remained untouched for weeks. His laptop became both his lifeline and his torment. Every click, every refresh, every thank you for applying email with no follow-up, they all added weight to a heart already drowning. But he stayed quiet. He never yelled, never threw blame, never reminded her of the days he paid for everything with a smile, or how he once planned her surprise birthday trip with half a month's salary. He didn't expect gratitude. He just wanted respect. But even that, it seemed, had quietly walked out the door. Zara had grown cold. Not overtly cruel, just distant. Her words were polite, robotic. Her eyes rarely met his. Her laughter had vanished, except when she was with others on the phone. She began talking more to screens than to him. She didn't ask how his day went. Didn't notice when he skipped meals. Didn't see the darkness creeping into his gaze, the kind that didn't come from tiredness, but from something heavier, something unspoken.
And Rayanne?
He noticed everything. Every time she flinched at his touch. Every time she sighed when he entered the room. Every time she smiled at someone else's success and looked at him like a burden. He felt it. And it hurt more than losing the job. Because poverty doesn't always destroy people. But being unloved while trying your best? That's what breaks a man. He started talking less. What was the point of sharing when she didn't want to hear it? He spent most of his time on the balcony now, a place that once held their tea, their dreams, their late-night talks. Now it held only silence and a flickering light bulb. He'd sit there for hours, scrolling job sites, watching tutorials, applying to roles he was overqualified for. Some companies ghosted him. Others offered salaries that felt like charity. Still, he applied. Because somewhere inside, a voice whispered, "If you fix this, maybe she'll love you again." He tried to help around the house too. Washed dishes, cooked dinner, folded laundry. Things he'd once done out of love, now done out of fear. Fear of becoming invisible. Fear of being called useless. But she didn't say thank you. Didn't even notice when he fixed the broken door latch or cleaned the mess in the kitchen after she left in a rush. One evening, as he cooked dal, she walked in, glanced at the food, and said, "We're really becoming basic, aren't we?"
He didn't respond.
Not because he didn't want to, but because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been felt and ignored. He kept old photos on his phone, the ones where she looked at him with eyes full of admiration. He stared at them sometimes before sleeping, like a man visiting the grave of someone still breathing. One night, he opened their wedding video, watched the part where she smiled at him under the lights and said, "With you, I feel safe."
He paused the video there.
Safe. When had that changed? When had she stopped seeing him as her protector and started seeing him as her problem? He didn't blame her entirely. He knew how hard it was to adapt, to downsize, to live without the comfort they'd both grown used to. But all he wanted, all he begged for in silence, was understanding. Not pity, not patience. Just a reminder that he still mattered. Even if his wallet was empty. Even if his inbox stayed quiet. Even if the world forgot him. She shouldn't have. But she had. And the scariest part? She hadn't left him. She was still in the same house, wearing the same ring, sleeping in the same bed. But emotionally, she was gone. And Rayyan, the once confident, stable, dream husband, now sat alone on the edge of their shared bed, staring at the wall, wondering, how do you hold on to someone who already let go in their heart? The house was still asleep when he made his final walk through it. Rayyan moved slowly, quietly, not because he was afraid of waking her, but because his soul felt heavy. Every step felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, every room echoing with memories that used to make him smile, and now only made his chest tighten. The living room, where they used to sit and laugh at nothing. The kitchen, where he once surprised her with burnt pancakes, and she still called them perfect. The small hallway, where she kissed his forehead before he left for work, every single day. That version of them was gone. And he had finally accepted that she wasn't coming back. Not the real her. Not the one who loved him for his heart instead of his wallet. He paused at the dining table, the one place that had become the quietest in the house. On it he placed a small, folded note. It wasn't long. It didn't blame. It didn't scream. It just said the truth he had carried alone for months. I was your dream man when I earned, but you couldn't love the man I really am. Then he placed his wedding ring next to it. A silent goodbye. Upstairs, Zara slept, unaware that this morning would change everything. She had tossed and turned the night before, annoyed by his silence, irritated by how he just wasn't trying hard enough. She hadn't asked how his day had gone. She hadn't noticed the exhaustion in his eyes or the deep sighs he gave when he thought she wasn't listening. And now, she wouldn't even get to say goodbye. Rayyan didn't take much. Just a duffel bag, his documents, a faded photo of them from better days, and the watch she had given him on their first anniversary, the only gift of hers he still wore. He looked back one last time. The curtains danced in the breeze. Sunlight crept through the windows. It looked peaceful, but inside, everything had already crumbled. Outside, the world carried on. Birds chirped. Vendors shouted in the street. Children waited for school buses. No one knew that a man was walking away from the life he had tried so hard to hold together. No one saw the heartbreak masked behind his calm face. No one could hear the sound of his hope breaking, not in a loud crash, but in a quiet, mournful whisper. He didn't know where he was going exactly. Just away. From the coldness. From the judgment. From the silence between two people who once swore they'd never sleep angry. Zara woke up around 10. She stretched, annoyed at the late hour. The smell of breakfast didn't greet her. Neither did Rayyan. She called out once, casually. No answer. She rolled her eyes and got out of bed, thinking he'd gone for a walk again, probably sulking, as she called it. But then she saw the note. She stood still, reading it over and over, as if the words might change the more she stared at them. I was your dream man when I earned, but you couldn't love the man I really am. Her hands trembled slightly. Her heart didn't know how to react. Was this a joke? A trick? A tantrum? But then her eyes fell on the ring. His ring. Gone from his finger, now lying cold on the table they once decorated with candles and flowers. This wasn't a joke. He had really left. Panic rose. She checked his closet. Half empty. His favorite jacket, missing. Laptop, gone. Toothbrush, charger, the drawer with important documents, all taken. Reality hit her like cold water. Rayyan, the man she had once called her everything, had walked away. Not because he didn't love her, but because he finally realized she didn't anymore. And the worst part? He didn't even need a fight to leave. Because what they had was already over. Only the walls were still pretending to be a home. She sat down, holding the note like it might burn her. For the first time in months, she cried. Not out of anger, not out of frustration, but from a deep, aching sadness. Because now that he was gone, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. She thought he'd always stay, that he'd always keep trying, that she could keep pulling away and he'd keep coming closer. She was wrong. And now there was just a note, a ring, and a house full of memories. But no man, no love, no dream. Only the echo of the man she lost, not because he failed to earn, but because she failed to see his worth when he had nothing but love to give. Zara sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in her designer shawl, yet feeling colder than ever before. The house hadn't changed. The chandeliers still sparkled, the curtains were neatly drawn, and the floor beneath her feet was warm with underfloor heating. But her heart? It was frozen. Rayyan was gone. And now, for the first time, she realized what true silence sounded like. Not the peaceful kind, the haunting kind.
Calls came in that day.
Her sister, her friends, even her mother. But she didn't pick up. What would she say? That the man she once showed off like a trophy had left? That she pushed him away not with shouting, but with disappointment, with absence, with coldness? They would ask her questions. And the most painful one would be, why did he leave? And she didn't have the courage to answer honestly. Because she had forgotten to love him when he stopped being her provider and asked, for once, to be simply her partner. The home was still full of things. Closets brimming with clothes. Shoes stacked by color. Shelves packed with candles she never lit and books she never read. The kitchen had groceries, expensive ones. Imported sauces, glass jars with fancy labels. But no warmth. No aroma of his favorite chai. No humming of his voice. Just silence, like the house itself was grieving with her. That evening, she sat in the lounge, sipping tea that tasted like regret. Everything felt exaggerated now. The space, the stillness, even the ticking of the wall clock that Rayyan once teased was louder than her voice when she was angry. Her eyes wandered to the couch where he once sat after work, tie loosened, exhausted, but smiling, just because she walked into the room. How long had it been since he smiled like that? How long had it been since she looked at him without disappointment clouding her gaze? The doorbell rang. Her heart leapt for a second, some foolish hope whispering maybe it's him. But it wasn't. Just a delivery boy. She took the package, a dress she had ordered weeks ago. She opened it, held it up against herself in the mirror. It looked perfect. But something inside her whispered, who'll see you in it now? Who'll tell you you're beautiful, even in pajamas and messy hair? She folded the dress and kept it away. It meant nothing now. In the following days, Zara went through motions. She cooked, not because she wanted to eat, but because the silence was too loud. She cleaned, not because the house needed it, but because her thoughts were too painful. She read through Rayyan's messages, looking for signs of when he started slipping away, signs that maybe, just maybe, she could have caught in time. But there were none. He had cried silently, broken silently, and left silently. And she had been so busy counting his income, she forgot to count his bruises. Neighbors saw her. Polished, poised, composed. They said, she's strong. But inside, Zara was breaking in places no one could see. The same woman who once couldn't stop talking about her perfect husband now couldn't even say his name aloud without feeling a lump in her throat. She had everything, the car, the home, the gold, the titles. But none of them called her John anymore. None of them waited to hear about her day. None of them put their arms around her when the world felt too heavy. One night, she stood at the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, people laughing, cars honking, life moving. But she was standing still, a statue made of pride and sorrow. She clutched her phone and hovered over his number. Should she call? Would he answer? Would he even want to hear her voice anymore? She typed a message, erased it, typed again. Finally, she sent just 3 words. Are you okay?
Scene.
No reply. Her heart sank. Not because he didn't respond, but because she knew she had lost the right to ask. The next morning, she opened the wardrobe and found a note taped to the inside panel, one she had missed before.
It was his handwriting.
If one day you realize what you had, know that I waited longer than I should have, hoping you would see me, not just what I could give you. Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just a note. It was a mirror. And in it, she saw a woman who had been blind. Blind to love. Blind to loyalty. Blind to the man who once brought her flowers with calloused hands and tired eyes. Now, she was surrounded by all she had ever wanted. And yet, she had never felt more alone. Not because she lost a man who earned, but because she lost the only man who ever gave her everything without asking for anything in return. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Zara had memorized the sound of silence. It had become her closest companion. She tried everything. Called his old number. Texted him. Sent emails. Messages left unread. No response. Just empty echoes. She even went to his old office, hoping someone might know where he'd gone. But all she got was a shrug and a polite, "He doesn't work here anymore, ma'am." She didn't know where he lived. Didn't know which city he'd moved to. He had erased himself from her world completely, gently but firmly. No drama. No revenge. Just absence. A loud kind of silence. Some nights, she would sit on the floor of their old bedroom, knees to her chest, staring at the door. "Maybe he'll come back," she would whisper. Then, the other voice, the colder one inside her, would answer, "Would you have come back to you?" And that hurt more than anything else. Because she knew the answer. She wouldn't have. The world thought she was fine. Why wouldn't they? She still dressed well. Attended weddings. Smiled in photos. But the smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. The sparkle had dulled. Not from loss of wealth, but from the loss of someone who once looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. She used to be adored. Now she was simply remembered. One afternoon, she found herself in an old cafe, one they used to visit. She sat in the same corner they once laughed in, hoping to feel something. A ghost of the past, maybe. And then it happened. The waiter placed a cup of tea in front of her and smiled. "Same order, ma'am." He used to say, "She doesn't like change. You must be her." She froze. Her hands trembled. He had been here. Recently. But he had said nothing. Left no message. Just remembered her preferences and moved on. That night, she cried in a way she hadn't in years. Not loudly. Just soft, broken sounds into her pillow. The kind of tears that come from knowing you've hurt someone who truly loved you. The kind that come when you realize you didn't lose him to failure. You lost him to yourself. She had once believed love was flowers, dates, luxury. But Rayan had loved her in silence. In how he held her shoes when she complained her feet hurt. In how he stayed awake when she was unwell. In how he smiled even when he had nothing in his pocket, just to keep her happy. And she had measured his worth in money. When he needed support, she offered shame. When he needed patience, she gave pressure. When he fell, she stepped back.
She often spoke to herself now.
No longer out of madness, but memory. Every night, before falling asleep, she would whisper the same sentence into the dark room. "I loved a dream and lost a man." Once, a mutual friend told her that Rianne had started a small business in a quiet town. "Is he married again?" she had asked, her voice barely a whisper. The friend shook his head.
"No. He doesn't talk about the past."
"But he seems peaceful." And that, somehow, broke her even more. Not that he was alone, but that he had found peace without her. Zara now lived among things that once made her feel rich. Chandeliers, cars, branded clothes, but none of them could hold her when she cried. She used to want the world. All she wanted now was him. His silence. His quiet strength. His flaws. His tired face. But regret, she had learned, never knocks early. It arrives when it's already too late. And so, she kept living, breathing, existing, hoping that one day, he might read one of her messages. Hear one of her whispered prayers. Maybe, just maybe, feel that someone still missed him. But deep inside, she knew, He wasn't coming back. Because the man she once loved had been broken, not by poverty, but by the look in her eyes when he had nothing. She married a dream. She lost a man. And now, all she had left was memory. A memory that whispered to her every night. If only love had been louder than expectations.